in trauma, uncut and unprocessed are two very different things. So let me go into this a little bit. I want to give you an example of a client I was working with. He's an amazing human being. And so he was holidaying with his parents and holidaying with a family holiday. And some information came up about how his mother saw his childhood. And he interjected and he said, "Respectfully, Mum, that wasn't my experience. Like you're claiming like it was all love and light. Yeah, we were poor, we didn't have much, but we had each other. That wasn't my experience. I was hurt, I was abused. Like this isn't my experience." Now they have a really great relationship, like a beautiful relationship. They've done plant medicine together and with the family. It's an amazing relationship. And from my perspective, and they both agreed, let's talk about this. Actually, let's get into this later. Let's get into this with Dad, and let's actually open this conversation up. So a few weeks later, he opened this conversation up, and he was sharing with me. And this was really powerful for him, right? And well, let me caveat something first. Let me explain something. What I mean by let me define it: uncut and unprocessed, right? Actually, no. Let me come back to the uncut and unprocessed piece, and I'll share a personal story for myself as well. So basically, I'm gonna move timelines a bit for you here. So he has this conversation. It's about a 5 or 6 hour conversation, really in depth, and he came away mixed emotions, mixed feelings, but overall really grateful for the conversation. And something was mentioned to him like, "Oh, we should do a podcast on this, or we should express this to the world. This is amazing, like the way that you're having this conversation, and people need to hear this to heal." And I'm like, "Yeah, great, but is there more for you here? Have you fully processed this conversation, this interaction, right? Like you want to be uncut in the way you express to the world, but can you be uncut if you're not fully processed? If you're unprocessed, you can't be uncut, you can't be truthful, you can't be authentic." Let me give you an example of what I mean. When you have a relationship and you break up, and it's a difficult breakup, let's just say. I mean, most breakups are pretty difficult. Not all, but most. Some are really, there's a conscious uncoupling that takes place, but there's some level of difficulty, right? There's some level of grieving. But let's just say you then don't process your feelings. You don't grieve properly that relationship. You don't go through the somatic release. You don't go through the reframing of it. Like you don't go through the really moving the big emotions through your body, right? Let's just say you don't do that. And you're unprocessed, and then you go into another relationship really quickly because you're addicted to the hormonal physiology of the limerence phase or the honeymoon period, right? We're addicted to just dating. Some people have that. This is an example. And you're unprocessed. You're not going to be able to be authentic and uncut your true expression of self in that next relationship because you are scared. You are concerned. You're still hiding, you're numbing, you're suppressing these big feelings that haven't been processed. They are unprocessed. So you won't be able to be uncut. You won't be able to be your authentic self because you're in protective mode. So I said to my client, I said, "Yeah, you want to jump on a podcast?" He didn't feel right about it anyway, but you want to jump on a podcast or you want to start sharing your experiences with the world, which is great, but you're not going to share them fully and authentically because you haven't fully processed this conversation that you've just had with your parents. And there's more to have still. There's hours and hours still. And then there's integration. Oh, integration. One of the biggest issues I have with modern plant medicine, when I say modern plant medicine, I'm talking about modern shamans. And some are real, genuine shamans connected to a deep lineage that value and revere their practice, and some maybe not so much, and then all in between, right? There's quote unquote good and bad in every field or in industry and so forth. But one of the issues I have with plant medicine is that it's journey after journey after journey with no integration. And when we have deep conversations and we're processing trauma, we have to process our trauma. If it's unprocessed, then we can't be uncut. We can't be authentic. We can't be real in the world. Like, we need to be able to release our stuff before we reframe. We have to move somatically, viscerally, through the body. Our stuff, our big emotions, physically. We have to give it context. We have to let it sit. We have to let it move. We have to then practice being a new way with other people. That can take months and years. Before then, we can reframe our experiences, right? And by reframing your experiences, it means that you're at a place where you can be uncut. You can be yourself. You can be vulnerable because now you're not protecting anything. Because people that cannot be vulnerable, people that struggle to be vulnerable, but please hear me here, that it's a pattern for them. They cannot share their truth. They cannot share their sensations, their feelings. They are harboring fear and they're in a protective state. And being vulnerable makes them feel, guess what, more vulnerable. It puts them at risk, at least the perception of. And they want to avoid that like the plague. So you cannot be uncut unless you're processed. And you've got to process yourself, and you've got to obviously surround yourself with people you trust, respect, and revere, therapists, coaches, etc., that can help you process that pain, that past trauma, that fear, that shame that you may be carrying, that unprocessed relationship where you broke up but you don't know how to grieve it, you don't know how to access the anger and the rage, and you're scared of it. You're not going to be able to be uncut version of yourself, just a true version of yourself, authentic, genuine. You're not going to bring that into relationship. You're going to hide, you're going to manipulate unconsciously, secretly. You're going to hide away from the world. People are going to feel that, and they'll feel through their own neuroception, their own nervous system, that is going to inform their brains, their amygdala, their body. And this person doesn't feel completely safe. They're hiding something. What are they hiding? Could they be hiding a lot of things? Is it dangerous what they're hiding? We're going to be in constant checking of self, like stuttering if we're unprocessed. We're trying to be uncut. We can't be authentic and real in expression because we fear judgment still. We're judging ourselves, and we're fearing judgment from others because we haven't processed our big feelings, because we're hiding. And that similar energetic of judgment and shame and guilt and hiding, they all just in this pool, swimming in the hot tub together, and you're in that hot tub and you're just doing what they're doing. It's a dominant feeling. It's a dominant place to be within. You want to be uncut. You want to be real in the world. You want to just get that weight off your shoulders. You've got to process. You've got to process your stuff. You've got to move it. You've got to move it. You've got to shift it. In relationship, it's so important. You've got to grieve. You've got to do the things that let you move on and give you freedom and spaciousness within yourself. Primal scream. Breathe. Use somatic resources. Hit shit if you're angry. Cry if you're sad. Move energy if you're irritated and restless. Physiology. Acting out our physiology, it helps close the loop on our trauma. So it doesn't keep playing out and out and out and over again. Remember, uncut and unprocessed are different. And you need to be processed in order to be uncut. Remember that. The world needs the greatest version of you. The world will receive the greatest version of you when you continue to process yourself. I promise I'd share a story. So with me, I would avoid processing myself. So therefore, I would constantly censor myself, but also present a false version of myself to the world. And so when I couldn't maintain that facade anymore, people would be angry with me and upset at me. And then I would get angry at them because I would want to protect myself. So I'd be bigger and louder than them. And all it did was suppress them, build resentment in them, in my partners and maybe even friends, and make me feel more guilt and more shame that I had to suppress with more anger to make me feel like I was in power, to help me feel that I was empowered or in control. We've got to process our stuff. Got to process our stuff. And you can too. It starts with wanting to and being aware enough and mindful enough that you've got something to process.